Hi everybody, welcome to the first lecture from our higher education book, looking at the fiscal context and the role of the budget manager in higher education. So this book, why I picked it, it's one of the most accepted and respected books in higher education management. If this was a higher education management finance class, you would almost certainly be reading this book. It's going to give you really more stuff for entry-level administrators in higher ed than it is for deans and college provosts and stuff. This is really going to be looking at kind of the department level, maybe your college heads, things like that. You're going to see similarities between this in K-12, but the big thing that I want you to remember is that tuition drives higher education and taxes drive K-12 education. Taxes are coming from the public just the same way tuition is, but taxes, we feel that we have more input and control where that money goes than tuition. That's changing in the United States. Now people are holding tuition more accountable, which is going to create some issues, especially those of you that are in higher education and working with undergraduates. So certainly something to consider. So the following course learning objectives are addressed throughout this book. We're looking at sources of revenue for private higher education institutions in the U.S., and we're looking at ways to use data to plan and allocate resources. This is, as I said, our higher ed component, and it's important that we address those learning objectives. So, if you are in higher education, money means more than it does to public school employees. You're going to have access to money. It might not be as much as public schools do, but you have access to money. Right now, I have access to money to go travel and to research. I have to use that appropriately so that that money actually leads to research. That'll help me make financial decisions, and advance myself. I have to rely on grants in my position as well. In K-12 education, only a select few people have control over the budget and budgetary issues, but it affects everybody in some form or another. So why is money more present in higher education? I think it's important that you note that most universities and colleges don't have set salaries for faculty members and employees. They're not there. Public school employees, they have salaries that are set. Most have pay grades, but some have no set salaries. So, some can be said with budgets and departments. For instance, my department, Ed Leadership, has more of a budget that early childhood does, but less than Management Information System does. And that's just an example. It directly impacts more people in higher education and more frequently than it does public schools. So it's there. You don't have to know as much about it, but you have to be smart about managing it. And if I can impart one thing on you, that's what I would say. Grants. I'm expected to try to find and fund grants to support students. It's part of my job. I was involved on a grant team this year that was a $1.5 million grant, and it failed. At least I tried, but I was involved on it, and I tried for a grant. In K-12, there normally are only a few employees responsible for grants, but many benefit when a grant is received. So, is a big idea in this class. Higher education funding decisions impact more people but give more control. There are advantages to this. There are advantages and disadvantages with this, but try to think about that. It impacts more people, but it gives more people control. So that's a big idea as we look at this textbook and we understand the context of higher education. So many challenges and changes have happened in higher education. Most of it has been because of the recession of 2008 and 2009, and you don't need me to say to all of you here that it probably hit you harder than it did a lot of other areas. And the long-term impact this has had on higher education. Many people and many faculty members were impacted across the United States, and we're still feeling the effects of this. Higher education may never recover, and we might have to have different contexts, and we already are starting different contexts. Online classes, online programs entirely. This class is online, but it's online kind of still as a face-to-face course, but you might have a different style of an online course. Other things that have happened, there's been problems competing for funds with public and private economic sectors. That's huge. The whole aspect of outsourcing has been a major problem in the United States over the last 10 years. Unfunded mandates at state and federal levels, not only in education but in government issues as well. Technology cost is increased through the roof, and it's different things that are increasing. Consider, when all of us were in school, there were different costs associated with technology. In the 1980s, a good computer was $2,000. Now we're looking for speed more than we're looking for memory, or than we're looking for capacity. In the late 1990s, we wanted bigger hard drives. Now it's more of a speed issue and a memory issue than it is a hard drive. Increased competition for faculty and staff, increased competition for students, concerns about the rising cost of higher ed, and rising costs for the purchases in good and service. We already touched upon some of these, but we're going to kind of expand on these a little bit. So, the direct impact on higher education, we've had a reduction of state support to public institutions through state grants and scholarships. I lived it. I unfortunately was a victim of it, but it's something that happens. In the private sector, a lot of endowment losses from private donors have been pulled. And those endowments depend on faculty lines and positions, and people rely on those donations. And when those donations aren't there ends up being budget cuts. So, I came from a unionized state. I'm anti-union. Doesn't impact, the efforts of this course, but I'm extremely anti-union. I hate unions. I can't stand them. I've seen them save people that don't deserve to be saved more times than not, and I've lived it as a school administrator. I hate them. I see no good in unions. So, just getting that out on the table. But my first faculty position, they decided in 2012 and 2013 that 15% of their faculty was going to be cut. Because it was unionized, I was last in, first out. So my program was a branch campus program with early childhood education. I was one of the 15% that was losing my job. I wasn't losing my job though. They gave me a terminal contract. They said that I had 2 years to find a job. And after 2 years, I wouldn't have a job after that. So I couldn't be hired full-time from the institution if I took the terminal contract. I served a year in it, and then I was looking the entire time, and then I jumped. A lot of people were upset at me in my institution and said, "Why didn't you serve your second year?" Well, I had no promises. I'm not going to come back for something where I'm not promised. And that was one of my issues with kind of unions. So I came from a unionized state, there were budget cuts, and it hit me. So we, our state school system of higher education, it's PASHA, cut 15% of their faculty, most of whom were me. They were young and they were newly minted doctorates. Pennsylvania still was not recovered from this. Many of the people in my graduating class, and I came from Pitt. Pitt is a top tier school. I mean, you needed, like the University of Pittsburgh for educational leadership. I'm coming from an exceptional program. A lot of people, were forced to go out of state to find faculty positions, and some don't even have them. And why I'm in Oklahoma? It's why I'm in Oklahoma right now. But I went to a similar school at Pitt, and that's a good thing. Many lines were replaced from being tenure track to non-tenure track so that we could save the university money. That can be a good thing, and that can be a bad thing. So I'm a functionalist. So what did I do? I said, I need to change. Something's wrong here, I need to learn a system. So this is what I started doing. I started recording online teaching lessons, putting them on YouTube. That way I could put myself out there, show that I have experience doing this work and that my research matches what I'm teaching. Was number one. Number two, I don't include this on my list, but I became involved in an organization called Quality Matters. Any class that I design that's online meets Quality Matters standards, meaning that the objectives align to what the expectations are, the assignments are aligned, there's learner-to-learner contact, learner-to-instructor contact, learner-to-content contact. The course meets ADA accessibility requirements, there's a good overview presented, and I've done that to try to diversify myself. I review online courses. I've reviewed about 40 of them. The institution that I work the most for is actually Florida International, right down your way. I review almost all of their online courses and tell them whether they meet standards or not. I've been doing that for 2 years. I started doing flipped classrooms. This is a practice that I'll use in my regular teaching, where I'll record a lesson the day before, put it online, have people watch it before they come in, and then when we get in, we jump in, we do an activity. More productivity, more work, I like it. I increase my research capacity by trying to travel and looking outside of my contexts. I can work outside of Pennsylvania, I can work outside of Oklahoma. I have contacts in Florida, I have a ton of them. I go to Florida and I can research here. My capacity has to increase. I have to work harder. And everybody that's in the faculty line, if you're sitting here thinking right now that you're going to get a faculty job, they're difficult and they're challenging. You have to increase your capacity. And you have to work harder. I don't mind. I'm ready to work and I'm ready to take on whoever's going to challenge me. So I think it's important you understand the context from other states and other organizations. In finance, state matters more than federal and local. So you need to know the context, the state of other states. Florida's main change across this state was the increase of use of adjuncts. I'm an adjunct for all of you. I'm a full-time faculty member at Oklahoma State. I'm tenure line, but I'm an adjunct in your eyes because I'm an adjunct for this institution. But I'm committed to your education still. I want to work with you, and like I said, if any of your research interests match mine, it would be great to continue a good collaboration. But we're going to talk about public institutions of higher education in this class much more than private, and I think that's important. So, increased competition for funds. Many programs have started to ask for more money. Transportation, prisons, public safety, technology, transportation, it keeps growing. Higher education keeps asking for more money. State institutions now need support from alumni in foundations, parents, businesses, and community. I note that this is state institutions that are looking for this. State institutions never asked for this. They got their funding from the state. That's how they survived, that's how they paid their employees, but now they're asking for donations and grants. So that's more competition for funding. More problems occur when that happens. So increased regulations and unfunded mandates, things like security and safety, privacy, research regulations, discrimination, student financial aid, and grant funding and reporting has caused more employees and more problems, really on school campuses. So security and safety. 1990, OSHA said we need to protect the working conditions of individuals in higher education. We're looking at high schools in here, elementary schools, and we're looking at higher education. Elementary schools and high schools there should be one way in, one way out. There should not be open campuses and open systems. Colleges are open systems. If a crisis happens, there are going to be problems, but that's why we have security and safety concerns. The Student Right to Know Act and Campus Security Act further extrapolated this, and we've had to have more influx of campus security costing money, and also to avoid lawsuits. Because of this, there's more personnel, there's more cost for printing, mailing, and other means of communication as well. So we're increasing security and safety. Student employee privacy. FERPA regulates access to student records and requires institutions to report information on an annual basis. We also have to provide faculty and staff with privacy protections as well. There have to be employees that are responsible for handling this stuff that never were there before. Research regulations. These eat up a ton of cost on college campuses. Animal Welfare Act and Human Subjects Research Act. Everything that I do goes through human subjects research. It is a pain in the butt. If I submit an IRB in January, I'm crossing my fingers and praying that it gets back in April. Multiple people have to read it, multiple people have to approve it, they have to stamp it, and it has to be good to go. There have to be staff members that are hired to meet compliance needs across for these areas. I can't even imagine what it's like for animal welfare. I'm sure it's even worse. I have no experience in that, but I've experienced in this, and I know this is trouble. And it takes time. You know, research that I want to do, I better start it in January or February. So discrimination. Discrimination has increased costs. It's Title IX and the Rehabilitation Act. Basically saying that we have to have disability accommodations. Older historical institutions have had to change to accommodate, and Title IX has to say that there have to be equal program costs and there have to be compliance as well. Student financial aid. Most institutions don't get support for financial aid, but they fight for the financial aid from the students. So we get the aid from the students, but we also don't, we don't get any help in helping the students get the aid, but we want the students to get the aid so we get paid. Employees have to be hired to control that revenue stream. The financial aid requirement needs for colleges to operate. I mean, how many of you here are on financial aid? I'm sure quite a few are. How many of you are getting grants from your districts to go take classes? Hopefully you are. So grant funding and reporting, this is another major concern in public institutions. Grants fund faculty members, reduce costs, and bring colleges and universities notoriety. Employees that find and report grants should be a priority for the schools, and they should make money. If you can get grants, you should make money. So attendance, the cost of attendance is growing politically and from society. Other things are changing as well. We have cost of technology, increased competition, cost of goods and services, and competition for faculty and staff. Technology. I mentioned, technology costs are enormous for institutions. Personal level, your costs of technology are enormous, and they're going to continue to grow with every change. Every year, there are new changes and new technologies developed to improve instruction and communication, and the organization that wants to be progressive has to adapt to those changes. So this is both a blessing and a curse. Faculty and staff. Higher education competes with business and industry for both skilled and unskilled workers. Technical managers are in demand in all sectors of the economy, which means that they might not go to the college that you expect them to go to. When I say go to the college, I mean go to the college to work. Doctoral candidates aren't being recruited as much for faculty positions and more for business and industry. My background is human resources, and I do work in succession planning. If I wanted to leave the faculty ranks, I could get a job probably paying me a lot more money. I'd have to work probably 40 or 50 hours a week. I'm already doing that, but I'd have to work even more. But my background in ed admin and human resources would open up a lot more doors for me. Because of this, the cost of employees is going to continue to rise as well. So most institutions depend on students to fund them. That is a no-brainer. So you must recruit students, but mostly graduate level students. That's where the program recruitment has to come in, because you know that you're going to charge more for graduate tuition than undergraduate tuition. The school must invest in them, give them forms of support, and make them feel like they're going to be successful and get a job afterwards, and support them after they finish. I can't stress that enough. Don't just give somebody a degree, say bye, good luck to you. You got to support them. That's something that institutions need to work on. Cost of goods and services. Scholarly journals and libraries are almost costing 300% more. Textbooks, the costs are through the freaking roof. It's why I'm using older textbooks for this course. I'm doing that intentionally. I'm saving you money on it because the cost of textbooks are up and up and up, and they're not going anywhere. So our textbook is going to talk and discuss the difference between public and private institutions. Really, I think the main thing that you need to consider is control of financial matters from grants, student aid, tuition and waivers, and government support. We're going to focus more in this class on public, but we'll have some stuff on private anyway. So for public institutions, actually that should read public, so I apologize for the typo. I have to go back and correct that. Financial policies, investment strategies, and institutional policies are through the government. They're more campus-based, and administrative bodies are the ones that make those decisions. For private institutions, fiscal policies are easier to navigate. You can move money around, you don't need approvals, you don't need bureaucracy. If the money is there, it's a private institution, they are welcome to privately spend it any way that they want to. For private institutions, adding new positions is very easy. A new faculty line could be created overnight in a private institution, and they can do that. In a public institution, there has to be funding, there has to be just approval, it's more complicated, and it can be more challenging. Compensation, most employees are paid better in public institutions because there are state level controls to protect their salaries, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't go work in a private institution. So nothing is harder to navigate in state institutions than purchasing agreements. Trust me. If you want to purchase something, this is the biggest pain in the butt that you will ever face. When a state contract is in place, the budget manager has to show cause They don't need to purchase from that source. They're stuck with it. And they have to work with that source.